now watching Wayback Wednesday, sponsored by Davenport Auto Park, the ride of your life. And also sponsored by Flores Glass, serving the area since 1977 with residential and commercial work.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to another episode of Wayback Wednesday. I'm Randy Adcock. So glad you could be with us tonight. Got a lot of ground to cover tonight, and we're going to move fairly quickly, but as always, love to have your calls. 407-1111 is the number. If you remember from last week's show, we spent a fair amount of time talking about the Po-My Inn. And I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but I didn't think at all when preparing for last week's show, I didn't think at all about supplying a picture of the Po-My Inn, when in fact I do have a picture of the Po-My Inn. So we're going to share that with you here shortly. But while I was getting ready for the night's show during the span of last week, because it takes me about a week to get ready for a show, I was very fortunate to have some pictures and some things sent to me. Randy Harrell sent me some pics. Sam Parham sent me some tonight, in fact, just before the show came on the air, and I managed to get those worked into the repertoire for the night, so we'll get to those too. But I stumbled across a bit of information about another restaurant. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight too, and show you some old pictures and talk a little bit about some more of that 200 block of Church Street. If you remember South Church Street from last week, there was just an awful lot of business going on in that one block, the gas stations and the Firestone and the Western Auto and the Davenport Gardner building. I mean, there's just a lot in that one block of the 200 block of Church Street. So we're going to revisit that tonight too. Before we get into everything else, let's go ahead, Lee, and put up item number one. This is actually from a postcard from 1934, somewhere along in there, of the Po-My Inn. And if you remember from last week's show, this was actually, the address was, I think, 602 South Church Street. And just to, well, the overpass coming from Franklin Street and crossing over the railroad tracks over to Georgia Street on the other side, this building had to come down to make room for that overpass. And so, and just to the left, it's off the screen behind that tree on the left-hand side there, but there was a house there. It was still there, in fact. There was a house there. I think it was 608 was the actual address of that house. But that house is still standing. But if you were to go down Church Street now to the 600 block of Church Street and stand right there underneath the overpass bridge and look to the west, you'd be looking roughly in the area where the Po-My Inn was situated. And of course, to the left of this location, that old two-story house is still there. And it was a residence for some time for some of the principals of the Po-My Inn. So anyway, that's it. I did some looking to see if I could find another picture of the Po-My Inn, and honestly, I found this come from a postcard, by the way, and you see in the bottom there, thecardcow.com is a website that specializes in postcards and memorabilia and that kind of stuff. And so I'd actually had this, but I understand there's a couple of these postcards floating around town, but I've not seen another image of the Po-My Inn other than this one. So anyway, also, if you remember from last week's show, we talked about Sam Parham's father temporarily ran a little pharmacy, drugstore type operation inside the Po-My building there. And it was referred to in several advertisements and publications as being the Po-My building. And obviously the Po-My Inn was there, but there were other businesses. There was a jewelry store, for example, was in there for a while. And as I said, the Mr. Parham's drugstore was in there for a while. And there was a newsstand in there, I think, for a while too. So anyway, tonight Sam sent me a couple of pictures of some really neat pieces of furniture and so forth that actually came out of the Po-My Inn. So Lee, if you would, let's put up item number two for our viewers. This is actually a chair that was in the Po-My Inn. And keep in mind now, the Po-My Inn was actually started in 1934 and was in operation up to about 1957 when it was torn down to make room for the overpass. And so we don't know exactly when these chairs occupied the space there in the Po Mayan, but suffice it to say they're probably well over 60 years old and could be older than that, in fact. But this is just a really neat old chair. This is the front of the chair. And the next picture, Lee, if you would go ahead and put that one up, is a picture of the back of the chair. And you see some really ornate detail there. You just don't see this kind of work on furniture anymore, unfortunately. This really intricate detailed carving and the woven seat and the woven back, just something that's just hard to find today unless you're looking at some old furniture. Another picture he sent me is some really, when I first saw this, I thought it was lamps, but I think they're actually vases, or if I stick my finger, I can say vases. So Lee, put up number 4 if you would. And this is a picture of some vases that came out of the Po Mayan. And they're just really neat. These things to me, like, they could very easily go back to the turn of the century, perhaps even as late as the late 1800s, early 1900s. I'm not exactly sure how old they are, but they're really neat. Oh, we got a call. Let's get this call. Hello, caller, you on the air?
Yes. Randy, this is Vivian Davis.
Yes, ma'am.
And those vases or vases are mine.
Oh, they're yours.
They're
Okay.
mine.
The chairs are yours too?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Sam didn't tell me but he just said you might call, but he didn't tell me they were yours. But they're yours.
No, they are mine, and they came out of OMIN, and I can tell you how I got them.
Okay.
The man and the woman that I got them from was a Mr. Parker, but I do not remember what their names were.
Okay.
But he had gotten a job in Raleigh, and they were going to be leaving Rocky Mount. So they wanted to downsize and get rid of a lot of their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so Norman's mother and I went over there to the sale, and they had those 2 chairs. And she bought the 2 chairs and the 2 vases. And she kept them all these years. But when she died, she gave me she gave me one of the chairs before she died. And then when she died, I got both of the vases. But they came out of the Po Mayan. And I have no idea how old they are, but
they're really beautiful. They
I was
are.
a little girl, and I remember going in the Po Mayan. See, I'm 83 years old, so I go way back.
Well, I'm so happy that you shared these
Going
with
in that
Sam.
Po Mayan.
Yeah, I'm.
The question. I need to ask the question.
Okay, go ahead.
It was on the corner of Raleigh Road and Church Street.
That's right.
Okay, before that bridge went over, if you kept right straight across, was that continuing to be Raleigh Road and went across the railroad track and right on out to, where the dairy bar and all was?
It's interesting you asked that question because actually what happened was there was a section of street there referred to as Edgecombe Street. And Edgecombe Street actually came across the railroad tracks, and then Raleigh Road was on either end of Edgecombe Street. So why they chose to name it Edgecombe Street, I don't know, but that little section of road that went across the railroad tracks and conjoined, might as well say, East Raleigh Road with West Raleigh Road, or Raleigh Street, that section of street was actually called Edgecombe Street. And there was right
across the street from the Po Mayan was a service station, and then there was Cadell Motor Company.
Right, I've got pictures of that.
And that service station, the owner was a real good friend of my father. His name was John Snyder.
Okay.
And I remember going to that service station, just a little girl, probably 4 or 5 years old, with my daddy, and we would go over there to the Po Mayan and go to the newsstand and, just do different things there on that corner. And also, I remember coming down Raleigh Road on the school bus, and it turned and went up Church Street.
That's right.
Instead of going across the road, it went up Church Street because I went to Bimini School.
I see, okay. You went over there with my mother. My mother went to Bimini too.
And now, who was your mother?
Then she would have been Sonia Paris.
I knew Sonia.
Yep. And
I sure did.
Yep. She went to
Sure
Benado.
did.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you so much for calling in, and thank you for sharing these pictures with us. I love these vases.
Well, I would love to know just how old they are, but I know that they come from there, and that's been a long time ago.
You need to find an episode of that. What's that show where they evaluate old stuff? The traveling.
That road show.
That's the one. That's the one. Yeah. Yeah. You might be pleasant. You might have a little small fortune worth of value here.
Well, there's some numbers on the bottom of those vases, but I don't know. I wouldn't think it would be the year because I think it's 1300 something.
Right. That was probably a series number or something like that. Probably was.
Yeah, that might just be how many were made that.
Exactly.
Exactly. But anyway, I wanted to share that with you because he said, you're going to do the Poem I End.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you did, and thanks for watching.
Uh-huh.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye. All right. Yeah, Sam had told me that Vivian might call in, but he didn't tell me that the chairs and the vases or vases were hers. So that's really neat. I'd love to hear these old stories. Okay, Lee, let's move on then. Item number 5 is actually from a couple of pictures that Randy Harrell sent me. And this one is really, I had not seen this picture before. And what you're looking at here is the old number 2 fire station that, of course, present day is the Fire Station Museum here in Rocky Mount. But I draw your attention to the right-hand side of the photograph, and there's literally a house there. Now, I'm guessing it looks like it could have been attached to the fire station. I wouldn't bet money on that one way or the other. It's hard to tell from the angle the picture was taken, but it's definitely a house as opposed to a business. And so one thought was, well, maybe that's where the firemen slept, but there's an upstairs in the firehouse, and they had the fire pole, and so I don't really think that was a place where the firemen slept. I've got to do some more research, see if I can find out exactly. This picture dates back to the 1920s, I'm guessing, but I had not seen this particular picture before, and I'd never realized that there was a house there on that corner before Marx Brothers Tire was there. In fact, even before Marx Brothers Tire was there was something else there and I didn't know about. Let's move on if we could to item number 6. Item number 6, this picture was taken about the same time frame. If you look at the vehicles there, they're almost identical. So we're talking probably sometime in the early 1920s, I would guess. But you see now that house that was there in the previous picture on the right-hand side of the fire station is gone, and it's been replaced with a brick building. And if I'm not mistaken, that brick building would eventually become Marx Brothers Tire. But now, that building that you're looking at there on the right-hand side, this predates Marx Brothers Tire. Lee, can you zoom out? There's a bit of that picture is being cut off on the right-hand side because at the very top there's actually a couple of letters of a sign at the very top of that building on the right-hand side. And I'm not sure if we can zoom out and look at the picture I printed off shows it, but I'm not sure if we can get it in the image we're looking at here now. If you can, it's okay. But anyway, it's hard to make out, but the sign above that building to the right looks like it starts with the letters S-I or either S-M. There you go. There you go. So as you can see, there's a sign above that building, and it's definitely not Marx. Starts with an S for sure. But I don't ever remember seeing this picture either. So this was pretty neat to take a look at. And so now we know, in addition to the Marx Brothers Tire, there was this business here, this whatever it was. And then, of course, prior to either one of the Marx Brothers or this business, there was a house there. So, again, we're talking back to 1920, so well over 100 years ago, or about 100 years ago anyway. Just some neat old history of the 200 block of... actually, this is not 200, this is right about the 400 block of South Church Street. Okay. We talked a little bit last week and week before last too about a place called Griffin's Drugstore. And we showed a couple of pictures of inside the drugstore, and Randy Harrell and I exchanged a couple of text messages about something that was in the floor of the Griffin's Drugstore, and finally came to the conclusion that it was a spittoon. I didn't think to put that picture in to show tonight, but I think you remember the image that we showed was a long, narrow building, and it had a showcase or whatever on the left-hand side of the building. And anyway, that was Griffin's Drugstore. And so I went back tonight to see, or early this week, I went back to see how far I could go back and identify anything dealing with Griffin's Drugstore. Item number 7, if you would, Lee. The Wilson Advance, which was a newspaper that was printed in Wilson in 1896, had this little short blip in the newspaper. It appeared January the 2nd, 1896, and you see there it says Dr. W.P. Mercer is building a telephone line from his home to Rocky Mount. The poles and wires are already on the ground, and the work of construction is going forward. For the present, the Rocky Mount terminus will be at Griffin's Drugstore, but arrangements will soon be completed by which a connection will be had with the telephone exchange at Rocky Mount. So in 1896, Griffin's Drugstore was already in operation, and this Mr. Mercer, Dr. Mercer, decided he wanted to have a telephone from Wilson all the way to Rocky Mount, and he was intending, I'm guessing he probably eventually did, make the other end of that telephone line go to Griffin's Drugstore. And you see that eventually it was to be tied in with the telephone exchange at the telephone office in Rocky Mount. So 1896, this little blip appeared. So okay, Lee, let's move on then. Item number 8. There was another local newspaper referred to as the Rocky Mount Motor. This is one I don't recall hearing about before, but I found this ad, and it appeared May 24th, 1900, in the Rocky Mount Motor local newspaper. And you see there's an advertisement advertising an antiseptic shaving parlor over Griffin's Drugstore. So that tells us, first of all, that it was a 2-story building. If Griffin's Drug was downstairs and this shaving parlor was above it, it had to be a 2-story building. So I thought, okay, and you see there's no street address here, no reference to where it was located. So I kept digging. I said, well, there's got to be some information somewhere about where it was. And lo and behold, I found a picture in a book, and I believe this is one of Monica Fleming's books. We talked about her before. Item number 9, if you would, Lee. This is actually a picture dating from 1906. And in 1906, you're looking at here on the right-hand side of the screen, it actually tells you, it says, theater on the street on lower left, 11/2/06, so November the 2nd, 2006. But it also says Main Street, East Side, being paved. So in 1906, Main Street in Rocky Mount was being paved. Now what you're looking at here is standing kind of middle of Main Street looking south. You're on the east side, or the Edgecombe County side of the railroad tracks. You're looking south, and there on the left you see Griffin's Drugstore. Now this building was located on the corner of Main Street and Tarboro Street. Now if you think for a minute, what's on the corner of Main Street and Tarboro Street? Well, of course you've got the south corner and you've got the north corner. On the north corner is Epstein's Clothing Building, and directly across the street on the south corner is what we refer to presently as the old People's Bank Building. So this building, this 2-story building where Griffin's Drugstore was there on the same spot where present day what we refer to locally as the People's Bank Building is located. So let's move on, Lee. This was in 1906. There was a pretty good run from at least 1896 to at least 1906. And in fact, I know as far forward as 1917, Griffin's Drugs operated out of this space right here. Because in 1917, December 15th of 1917, this little ad appeared. Lee, if you would, put up item number 10 for our viewers. And sadly, this is what's referred to as a receiver's sale. It's very similar to a bankruptcy sale, but basically, Griffin's Drugstore went out of business in December of 1917. And this ad appears, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically it says, under and by virtue of the power and direction contained in an order entered at the November term 1917, Edgecombe Superior Court, and the case therein pending entitled Joseph B. Hall and others versus Griffin Drug Company and others, the undersigned, receiver of the Griffin Drug Company, a corporation, will on Saturday, December 15th, 1917 at 12 o'clock noon at the Griffin Drugstore corner in the city of Rocky Mount, offer for sale to the highest bidder for cash the entire business, franchise, stock and trade, furniture and fixtures, lease equipments and properties of every kind belonging to the said Griffin Drug Company. This includes 2 shares of preferred stock of the United Drug Company, manufacturers of the Rexall medicine, and 1 share of the capital stock of the Rocky Mount Fair Company. So we're not sure what happened. Turbulent times, 1917, the Spanish flu was running rampant, so that could have had something to do with it. I'm not sure, but in any case, Griffin's Drug Store went out of business and had this receiver sale December of 1917. Now, if you think back, we've talked about the People's Bank building before, and I just realized it's time for our first commercial break. Lee, bring it back to me. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about this building here in this location where Griffin's Drug Store was located on the corner of Tarver Street and Main Street in the late 1800s and early 1900s, prior to the People's Bank building being there. But let's go ahead and get this commercial break in, Lee. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back with more Wayback Wednesday.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service. We offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family. And we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
There's a main nerve that leaves your back that goes into your hip and goes down your leg. It's called the sciatic nerve. A back injury can put pressure on that nerve, causing pain, numbness, tingling. Chiropractors can actually help that. At the Hammer Chiropractic Center on Sunset, we know exactly what to do. We have very good relationships with the doctors in Rocky Mount. We like to co-manage people's care. Some medications may help us do our jobs, and our jobs may help their medications work better.
Are you looking for the perfect space for your business in Rocky Mount? Discover the individual offices available on the 4th floor of the Healthview Capitol building in downtown Rocky Mount. These offices provide a professional environment with stunning views, ample natural light, and modern amenities in a secure environment. Join a community of thriving businesses and elevate your company to new heights. Rent includes utilities and Wi-Fi, and for an additional fee, you can have access to the building's gym. Schedule a tour today by calling Leanne Wester at 252-977-1616, extension 1012.
We're back. During the break, I realized that I've got 2 of my upcoming pictures here in reverse order, so we're going to jump just 2 of them. I think we're okay except for these next 2 here. I mentioned to you that the Griffin Drug Store occupied the corner of what's currently referred to as the old People's Bank building. Now, if you remember from previous shows, before the People's Bank building was the People's Bank building, it was actually the National Bank of Rocky Mount. Not to be confused with the First National Bank of Rocky Mount, which ironically, these 2 banks were in operation at the same time. The First National Bank was 1 block further east on the corner of Washington Street and Tarver Street. Someplace first was the Alford building, but that was the First National Bank. But the bank where is currently we refer to as the People's Bank was actually just called the National Bank of Rocky Mount. And that bank was actually built in 1918. So as soon as Griffin's Drug Store went out of business and went away, so to speak, that building was demolished and a new building was built there for the National Bank of Rocky Mount. And Lee, if you would, put up item number 12. This is a great picture. And this actually, I got this from Monica Fleming's book also, and it shows the construction of the National Bank of Rocky Mount. And you see it looks very much like this today. But it says the National Bank of Rocky Mount was built on the corner of Tarboro and Main Street. It was completed in 1918 with a 2-story base and 4 more stories rising above the downtown, making it Rocky Mount's first skyscraper. So, this bank, as I said, this building, I should say, is still here. I think there's several different businesses occupying the space now. But when it was built, it was known then as the National Bank of Rocky Mount. And so now, this is 1918, this bank building was constructed and occupied by the National Bank. Okay, Lee, now let's go back to number 11, if you would. This ad appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram July the 5th of 1919. It's kind of a grainy ad. The quality's not too great, but I draw your attention down to the bottom, and this ad was advertising the Avenger Drug Company. Avenger Drug Company, and underneath the name it says New National Bank of Rocky Mount Building. So they occupied one of the floors. I'm not sure which one. Like I say, this is including the basement, was a 6-story building when it was built. Still is, for that matter. But in any case, the Avenger Drug Company, it's interesting how they spelled Avenger, but it was occupying a space within the National Bank building in 1919. Okay. All right. So let's pause here for just a minute. After last week's show, if you remember, we talked a little bit. In fact, Lee, bring it back to me. We'll cover a little bit of ground here from last week's show, just kind of a recap. If you remember, we talked about the Davenport Gardner building, later to be the home for Western Auto, and then Broughton Furniture was there for a while. And we talked about the company that was in charge of constructing that building. And Eric stopped by the office this week and asked, what I could find out about the North State Construction Company, because they were the firm that was tasked with building that building. Mr. David Davenport and Mr. James Gardner put up the capital to finance it and get the building built, but it was North State Construction Company that actually built the building. So I went in search of what I could find about the North State Construction Company. And as it turns out, they had a pretty good run at business in Rocky Mount for a number of years and built a number of well-known buildings, some of which are still standing today, as a matter of fact. So having said that, Lee, let's jump on to item number 13. November of 1948, the Rocky Mount Telegram posted this ad advertising the grand opening and readiness for business of the North State Construction Company. There you go. Located at 830 Carr Street, and it says opposite Caramount Mills. So to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about here, if you're coming down, let's say coming down Falls Road from downtown Rocky Mount, and you get to Ridge Street, and you turn left, headed south on Ridge Street, you cross the railroad tracks there at Caramount Mills. That road to the left is actually Carr Street. Now, ironically, there's another section of Carr Street that comes off of River Drive. That's a 1-block long street, and back in the 30s and 40s, I had relatives living on that section of Carr Street. But as I said, if you're coming from Falls Road, you turn left onto Ridge Street and come up Ridge Street, cross over the railroad tracks there by the old Stalin's Oil Company, and come around the curve there. Caramount Mills is on your right. And just that first road to your left there is the 800 block of Carr Street. So that's where they started out at, 830 was the address, and it was North State Construction. And you see at the bottom there, general contractors and builders, repairing residential, new construction, commercial. The principals were Mr. Turner W. Battle and L. Earl Schuff. I'm not sure, I meant to call Lanny today and I got busy and forgot to do it, but I'm almost certain this is Lanny Schuff's father. Some of you may remember Lanny. He was a Rocky Mount City Council member for many years, some years back. But in any case, that were the two principals in the North State Construction. Okay, let's move on then. Item number 14, as I said a while ago, they built a number of very prominent, well-known buildings, many of which are still in business today or still standing today. Credit to how well built they were. Number 14, Lee, is another building they built, and this was in July of 1953, this ad appeared that says, "We point with pride to the first federal building at 116 South Franklin Street, which is now in the last stage of construction." And you see it's being built by North State Construction Company, general contractors. This building, of course, is still here. Kip Meadows owns the building now and runs his Nottingham company out of it. But this building and many others, in fact, around town were built by North State Construction. In addition to new construction, of course, they did remodeling, they did additions. I saw there were several references to they had built additions onto schools and different things like that. Number 15, if you would, Lee, December of 1953. It was a really nice article written up in the Rocky Mountain Telegram about Turner W. Battle. I'm not going to read this whole thing. It's kind of long, but I want to read just a little bit of it for you, kind of give you an idea of who the man was. It says, Turner W. Battle, president of the North State Construction Company, general contractors for the erection of the first federal building, is a native of Rocky Mountain and received his early education in local schools. He continued his education at Staunton Military Academy in Staunton, Virginia, and later at Severn School in Severn Park. I think that's supposed to be Severna. I'm not sure. It's in Maryland anyway. Still later, he was graduated from the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis, Maryland. It was at that later institution he received his engineering training, graduating with a degree in that particular field. He served in the U.S. Navy during World War II, and upon his discharge in the latter part of 1946, he became associated with S.S. Toller and Son, and later with D.J. Rose and Son, both local contracting firms. In November 1948, Battle and a number of associates organized the North State Construction Company, now one of this community's leading contracting organizations participating in all types of construction. So, naval officer, World War II vet, came back home and started this company with some other gentlemen, and really for a good many years was very active building new buildings in Rocky Mount, particularly office buildings and commercial buildings in general. And of course, as I said, did some residential work as well. Okay, let's move on. Item number 16. November 1955, this ad appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram, and it says, we are proud to have been selected as general contractor for the new Howard House cafeteria. Who knows anything about the Howard House cafeteria? This is one that threw me for a loop, and now I've got myself a new rabbit path to run down, if you will, rabbit hole to run down. I don't think I've ever heard of the Howard House cafeteria. But in 1955, North State Construction Company had won the bid to construct this building, and it doesn't say where it was, so I've got to run this down. I'm going to have to find out where it was and see what I can find out about the principal. But if anybody knows anything about this restaurant, the Howard House Cafeteria, give me a call. The number is 407. Oh, we got a call. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Thank you, Randy. Good evening.
Good evening, Bob. How are you, my friend?
All right. Regarding North State Construction, I just wanted to add that R.E. Harris, we called him Slim.
Right.
He was my Scoutmaster, Troop 108, sponsored by the Civitan Club.
No kidding.
He was employed by North State Construction, and in the late 50s, early 60s, I think he may have been an officer of the company by that time. But Slim Harris.
Yeah, as a matter of fact.
Scoutmaster.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. While I've got you, though, Lee, go ahead and put up item number 17. This was my next ad. I hadn't gotten to it yet, but since you went ahead and mentioned it, we'll go ahead and bring it up on the screen. Number 17, Lee. There you go. This was from May 25th, 1959, Bob. North State Construction announces it's also moved. They moved to 1020 Carter Street, but you see at the bottom there, Mr. R.E. Slim Harris is now the manager of North State Construction Company.
There you go. That's what I recall.
Yeah. And he was also a Scoutmaster, you say?
Scoutmaster, Troop 108, sponsored by the Civitan Club.
Okay. That's.
And the Howard cafeteria, I'm not sure if it was the one, but there was a cafeteria off the backside of J.C. Penney on the side street, not on Main Street, but there was a cafeteria back there that I recall in about the mid-50s.
No kidding. Okay. I'll have to do some running and see if I can run that down.
Okay.
All right, buddy.
See you there, Randy.
All right. Thank you now. Bye-bye. Okay. Yeah, Rocky Mountain, we've talked in the past in previous shows about the number of restaurants that have come and gone at Rocky Mountain since. Oh, we've got another call. Let's get this call. Hello, caller, you on the air?
Yeah, the Howard House.
Yes, sir.
What the man just said, it was on Western Avenue behind J.C. Penney and between there and Behringer Studios. And it was there in the early 60s because I carried newspapers and used to go in there on hot days and get cups of ice.
How about that? So it was actually had a Western Avenue address then?
I would think so, yes.
Okay. Well, I appreciate
I think it was the first business after you passed that alley that was behind J.C. Penney's that went down to Belk's.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I will certainly do some digging now. I've got a good clue to go after. I'll see what I can find, and we'll talk about it some more on next week's show.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Have a good night.
Yes, sir.
All right. But yeah, there over the years have been so many little coffee shops and cafes and restaurants, and there's been an awful lot of good, very good restaurants. Another call. Let's get this call. Hello, caller. You on the air?
Randy.
Yes. Turn your TV down.
Vision Davis again.
Yes, ma'am. If you turn your TV down, you won't get... There you go. Go ahead.
On Western Avenue.
Okay.
Yes, I remember going there.
And the, what was it called again? The Howard House?
The Howard House cafeteria, and it was right there behind J.C. Penney's on Western Avenue.
Right, that's what the other caller said. Yeah, I'm going to do some more digging to see if I can come up with either a picture or some information about that, and we'll share it on next week's show. I had not heard about it prior to getting ready for tonight's show.
Well, it didn't stay there too long.
Really? Okay. All right, well, thanks for calling in.
All right.
Good night. Okay. All right. Yeah, folks, just a reminder, the way this television programming stuff works, there's a bit of delay, and I'm not sure it's several seconds anyway. So when you call in, either mute your TV or briefly turn it down, and you won't get that echo back, because it does. If you're on that end of, if you're on the audience end, it gets really confusing to try to carry on the conversation in a live show. And like I said, it's just the way the technology works. I don't fully understand it myself, but just a reminder that when you call in, either mute your TV or briefly turn your volume down, and you won't have that feedback and echoing that's so confusing. Okay, so let's move on, Lee. Where are we at? That's number 17. Let's go to number 18, Lee, if we may. I thought this was really neat. It kind of predates me, though I very well remember hearing the stories about the kids having nuclear war drills in school and having to get up under the desks. And so when I saw this ad for a family fallout shelter, I kind of had to smile. It just immediately speaks to a bygone era. But you see, it says, how much is your family worth? Ensure the protection of your family with a family fallout shelter built according to official Office of Civil and Defense mobilization plans on file in our office. We have plans and prices to fit your needs. For details, contact North State Construction Company, Incorporated. I have to wonder how many fallout shelters are in Rocky Mount today. I don't know of one. I wish I could tell you that where there's one at, but I don't know of one. I suspect there may be one or two around still, but again, this is from an era where there was very much concern about a nuclear attack. We were in what was commonly called the Cold War with Russia, and so companies that had the skills and the capability to build bomb shelters were in demand. And how many of those were built and constructed here in Rocky Mount in this area, I have no earthly idea. I've never heard of one, though I would not at all be surprised to find that there are some fallout shelters, underground bomb shelters, if you will, somewhere around the Rocky Mount. So if you know about one, call, let me know. And I just realized it's time for our next commercial break. So Lee, let's go ahead and take that break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about another restaurant that some of you will remember from previous shows we've talked about. But I got some neat information that I didn't know prior to getting ready for this week's show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Wayback Wednesday.
I'm Daniel Moss, owner of Cornerstone Funeral Home, and I'd like to invite you and your family to give our family an opportunity to serve you in your time of need. And we offer a full line of funeral services, everything from visitations to graveside services to cremations on site with a live crematory, as well as a banquet hall to meet the catering needs of our families that we serve. We offer catering service. We offer refreshments prior to visitations and services of our family. And we want to invite you to come and experience the difference here at Cornerstone Funeral Home.
There's a main nerve that leaves your back that goes into your hip and goes down your leg. It's called the sciatic nerve. A back injury can put pressure on that nerve, causing pain, numbness, tingling. Chiropractors can actually help that. At the Hammer Chiropractic Center on Sunset, we know exactly what to do. We have very good relationships with the doctors in Rocky Mount. We like to co-manage people's care. Some medications may help us do our jobs, and our jobs may help their medications work better.
Are you looking for the perfect space for your business in Rocky Mount? Discover the individual offices available on the 4th floor of the Healthview Capitol building in downtown Rocky Mount. These offices provide a professional environment with stunning views, ample natural light, and modern amenities in a secure environment. Join a community of thriving businesses and elevate your company to new heights. Rent includes utilities and Wi-Fi, and for an additional fee, you can have access to the building's gym. Schedule a tour today by calling Leanne Wester at 252-977-1616, extension 1012.
Okay, all right, we're back. Just got a call during the break from a lady who said that she had the opportunity to go into and down into a fallout shelter in Nashville back in the early 1960s. I think she said, we got another call. Let's get this call. Hello, caller, you on the air?
All right. On Meadowbrook Road, next door to the address of 2077 Meadowbrook Road, back in the 50s, and Mr. William Franklin Dockridge built a fallout shelter behind his house. It went down in the ground. That's 2 doors down from where I live on Meadowbrook Road. I remember seeing it, remember going down inside of it.
Oh.
And it's been gone, dug up, and done away with for some good while now, but it was there. And it was put there. Mr. Dockridge was a builder. And he put it there in his backyard on Meadowbrook Road.
How about that? Now, is that the same? Was he related? Because there was a Bill Dockridge of Dockridge Gas Company here in Rocky Mount.
They would have been kin.
Okay.
The man's name was William Franklin Dockridge.
Okay.
He had a son named William Franklin Dockridge Jr.
Okay.
Also went to NC State at the same time I did.
Mm-hmm.
Lived out there on Meadowbrook Road.
Okay. Well, that's the first bomb shelter, underground bomb shelter I've ever heard about in Rocky Mount. I figured there had to be at least one around. There's probably more than that, at least at one time, I'm sure. But that's neat. That's really neat that you had a chance to go down in one. So that's 2 we've heard about, one in Nashville and at least one in Rocky Mount.
All right.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Okay. All right, Lee, I'll tell you, we got one more picture to share with you. This is just a fairly modern day shot of where the North State construction started out. I mentioned earlier, if you're coming down Falls Road, headed west on Falls Road, when you get to Ridge Street, there where the old hot dog stand was, if you would turn left and come up Ridge Street, come around the curve, cross over the railroad tracks, Caramount Mills is on your right, the first road to your left is actually Carr Street. And the other end of Carr Street is on the other side of Caramount Mills, and it's a 1 block long stretch of street that runs between Elm Street and River Drive. And so anyway, I had forgotten about this stretch of Carr Street on this side of Caramount Mills, on the west side. I'm sorry, that'd be on the east side of Caramount Mills. But anyway, put up number 19 if you would, Lee. And this is the intersection of Pine Street and Carr Street. There you go. And you see there on your left-hand side, the street markers, Carr Street goes left and right. And of course, it would dead end right here to your left would be Pine Street on the left-hand side of your screen. And so there, of those two green buildings, the one on the left is where North State Construction started out. That is actually the current address of where they were in 1948. Sometime later, they moved actually to Carter Street, and Carter Street is one block south of this location, kind of over behind the old Ann's Donuts, you know where that building used to be, or the building is still there, but Carter Street kind of ran around the backside there and come back in and joined Carr Street about a block further to your right, as this picture's showing right here. So anyway, they spent the entire duration of their existence, if you will, either at 830 Carr Street or I think the other address was 1030 Carter Street, but like I said, they were in the same general neighborhood. Okay, I mentioned briefly a minute ago about another restaurant, and we've talked several times about many restaurants on this show, and I'm always interested to hear about restaurants that I'm not familiar with or that were before my time, so to speak. And so one that come to mind, and we were talking about that 200 block of South Church Street earlier, and how many different things were there, and how many different businesses were there, just how they were cram-packed in. And there was even a few houses in there too, on both sides of Church Street in that 200 block. But one of the restaurants and businesses that was in that 200 block was the Wheel Row. And so I got to thinking about the Wheel Row restaurant, and I thought, well, you know, along the same vein of the Po My Inn, if you remember, the Po My Inn got its name from Mr. James Powers and Mr. George H. Miller. They took Mr. Powers' first two initials and Mr. Miller's first two initials and came together and created Po My for the Po My Inn. I thought, okay, well, there must have been two people who were responsible for naming the Wheel Row restaurant. So I went in search of who these two entities were that came up to be the Wheel Row restaurant. And it was a surprising twist here. And we'll get to the surprising twist in a moment. But first, Lee, item number 20, let's put that up on the screen for our viewers. This is a newspaper article from March the 12th of 1947. 1947, and it says, new restaurant opens Thursday. The Wheel Row Incorporated features modernistic designs. And I want to say Wilco so bad it makes my tongue crinkle all up when I try to say Wheel Row instead of Wilco, but it is Wheel Row with an R-O. Wheel Row Incorporated, Rocky Mount's newest restaurant located at 220 South Church Street, had plans completed today for its formal opening at 11:30 Thursday morning. The new restaurant, which was designed by Harry Harry's local architect, features the latest modernistic designs blended smoothly in a quiet, home-like atmosphere. Notice that phrasing, a quiet, home-like atmosphere. That'll mean more in a moment. Heavy carpeted floors and acoustic ceiling are used to eliminate excessive sound, while soft, indirect lighting and colorful drapery lend simple beauty to the room, which follows a pale blue scheme throughout. Okay. And there's more to the article, but I'm going to stop reading there so we can move on. Let's go to number 21, if we would, Lee. As was common, we've talked about this many times on this show, when a new business would open up, any other businesses that were involved with it put a supporting ad, if you will, in the Rocky Mount Telegram, such as this ad here. This appeared the same day, March 12, 1947, and you see Standard Electric Company congratulating Wheel Row Incorporated restaurant. We are proud to supply the modern lighting and electrical wiring for the Wheel Row Incorporated restaurant. Okay, so 1947, the Wheel Row is open for business at 220 South Church Street. Okay, item number 22, Lee. The gentleman you're looking at here above has nothing to do with the Wheel Row restaurant, but there's a neat little side story to this picture. Okay, this fella here is J.C. Cook. He's a young fella. He's the son of Mr. and Mrs. C.F. Cook of 118 Oak Street. Today, and this appeared December 10th, 1947. It says he received first place award in the Kiwanis Tuberculosis Committee's essay contest. His topic was the role of the local tuberculosis committee in the community. K.D. Battle, that's Kent Battle, the local attorney, chairman of the Kiwanis Tuberculosis Committee, made this award this afternoon at the chapel exercises at the high school. Mr. Battle also awarded second place to Betty Robbins, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. T.W. Robbins, 220 South Church Street. Now think about that for a minute. Kent Battle awarded Miss Betty Robbins, who was the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. T.W. Robbins, at 220 South Church Street. Well, wait a minute. We just saw an ad that said 220 South Church Street was a location for the Will Row restaurant. Okay, stay with me. All right, Lee, let's move on. Item number 23. This ad appeared May 25th, 1948 in the Rocky Mount Telegram. Actually, it's not an ad, it's an article, a really nice article. By this time, the Will Row restaurant had only been in business for less than 2 years. And you see the picture there, and it says, recommended Duncan Hines, author, adventures, and good eating along the highways of America. So there was like a national campaign sponsored by Duncan Hines, the folks who make the cake mixes and brownie mixes and so forth. They had this national campaign, and in fact, they put out a series of books giving people addresses and stops all over the roads, all over the country, of good places to eat. And it was kind of a prestigious thing to be included in this Duncan Hines book. So this article appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram May 25th, 1948. And as you see, it's a very long article. But I'm just going to read a couple of quick paragraphs because this tells a whole lot about the Will Row Restaurant and Mr. T.W. Robbins. Okay. Robbins, born and reared in Rocky Mount, but away touring the country and learning the restaurant profession since the age of 15, returned here with plans to build and operate a diner. Difficulties encountered in obtaining building materials preventing him from seeing his plans materialize, but he accepted an offer from his mother to use her home for the location of the proposed restaurant business. On March 13, 1947, Will Row Incorporated was born. The name was derived from abbreviation form of the owner's name. Wilson Robbins became Will Row. The business was incorporated to ensure its continued operation over a period exceeding over the life of its present operators. So the Will Row, the man's name, by the way, was Thomas Wilson Robbins. And when Thomas Wilson Robbins went off to learn the restaurant business, he was very excited to start his own restaurant. He came back to Rocky Mount. By this time, he had worked at several restaurants all over the country. And he came back here in 1947 to start a restaurant, and for one reason or another, couldn't pull it all together. And so after discussing it with his mother said, look, why don't you use our house? Let's make our home a restaurant. And that's what they did. So apparently this fellow went by the name of Wilson or Will, as opposed to his first name of Thomas. And so they took his first two initials of his first or middle name and the first initial of his last name, and the Will Row Restaurant was born. How about that? Okay, Lee, let's move on then. Item number 24. This was a 1948. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about this. 23A. This was the actual 1948 edition of the book I was just referring to, Adventures in Good Eating. And Duncan Hines put these books out. I'm not sure how many years they ran. I went on, did a Google search, and found this. As you see, it's a little bitty book. It's only like 6 inches by probably 3 inches. So you can put it in your pocket, your shirt pocket, pants pocket. But as you're traveling around the country, if you want to find a good place to eat, Duncan Hines generated a list of restaurants, and they, kind of said, okay, this is a good place to eat. We like their food. And it was a very prestigious thing for a restaurant to be included in the Duncan Hines Adventures in Good Eating book. By the way, this little bitty book is on sale, used, of course. $68, I think I saw it on eBay. A little rich for my blood, but if you like old books, maybe not so bad. Okay, Lee, now number 24. The 1948 Rocky Mount City Directory. I kind of did a screenshot here, and you see there, T.W. Robbins, and his wife was Patsy. Her middle name or maiden name was Ingram, Patsy Ingram Robbins. You see there at present Will Row Incorporated, 220 South Church Street. That's where they lived. And then down below, of course, you see the Will Row Incorporated restaurant ad and the same address, 220 South Church Street. I'm not sure how much longer Wilson Robbins' mother and perhaps his father, I'm not sure, stayed in the house, but certainly the restaurant ran for a number of years. And number 25, if you would, Lee, this is actually a picture. And I had this, and I've seen a couple of different versions of it, but this was the house that his mother and father lived in, and his mother graciously said, why don't you use our house and let our house become the Will Row Restaurant, and that's what they did. The building to your left there, that brick building to the left, is the one that was the, and I'm not sure when this picture was taken. If I had to guess, it's somewhere in the, I don't know, late 1950s, maybe somewhere along in there. But this was the Will Row Restaurant. And Lee, go ahead and put up number 26 if you could. And this is that aerial view we showed a couple of weeks ago where we were talking about Mr. Dr. Suter's father, that little house there on kind of about midway of your screen. But the yellow arrow is pointing to the Will Row Restaurant at 220 South Church Street. And you see just beside it is the Davenport Gardner building, which was, of course, the Western Auto building, later became Broughton Furniture. But there was a house there, and that's where the Will Row Restaurant, that's how it came to be. Number 27, Lee, this is an actual picture of a menu from the Will Row Incorporated Restaurant from 1949. There you go. They had a fairly extensive menu, but the thing that caught my eye was the prices. The most expensive thing on the menu was $1.50, and that was a full meal. Most everything was 90 cents, $1, $1.10. Get a lot of good food for $1, $1.50 at the Will Row Restaurant in 1949. By 1956, the Will Row Restaurant itself had gone out of business. Number 28, ladies, our ad appeared in the Rocky Mount Telegram June the 3rd, 1956, and it just says, for rent or lease, large room, 15 by 60, wall-to-wall carpeting, Venetian blinds, indirect lighting suitable for office space, formerly occupied by the Will Row Restaurant, 220 South Church Street. Wilson Robbins didn't stop with the Will Row Restaurant, though. He kept going. Number 29, Lee, he went to work for the Carlton House in 1962. At the same time, he was also working at Bienvenue Country Club. So let's move on. We're almost out of time. Let's real quickly run through his last two or three. This is 1974. He retired from Bienvenue Country Club after 18 years of running the restaurant there for Bienvenue Country Club. National Graphic did a really nice expose on him in 1974 when he retired from Bienvenue Country Club. Number 31, if you would, Lee. And this, I'm not going to read this, a very long article. We're almost out of time. But it was a really nice article that talked about him and his time in the restaurant business, working with not only Will Row, but Bienvenue Country Club, as well as the Carlton House Restaurant. Sadly, Mr. Robbins passed away June of 1981. This is obituary number 32, Lee. He was 71 years old when he died, and it doesn't say what he died from, but he was 71 years old. And then his wife, Patsy Ingram Robbins, passed away November 24, 2002 in Cary. She had moved there to be with her daughter. Speaking of her daughter, on a bit of a sad note, her daughter, Betty, the same one I mentioned earlier, who was awarded that essay contest by Kent Battle, her daughter married a man named McDermott. And sometime in the early 1960s, they were visiting some friends with somebody. I'm not sure exactly where it happened. But it was a small garden pond in the backyard, and they had a small child, 18-month-old little girl, I think it was, who wandered out by herself and fell into this little pond and drowned. And so that was a really sad thing, but I think they had a couple other kids too in later years. But anyway, that was Betty Robbins McDermott was her married name. Anyway, Lee, bring it back to me. That's going to do it for us tonight, folks. I want to thank those who called in and shared your memories with us. Always good to hear from you, the viewers. And I appreciate so much your contributions to the show and those who send me pictures and suggestions. I appreciate those as well. Have a great week, folks. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to one another. And we'll see you next week with more Wayback Wednesday. Good night.